Thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. At the end of today's presentation, we will conduct a question-and-answer session. To ask a question, please press star 1. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the meeting over to Laura Halstern. Ma'am, you may begin.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Laura Halstern, and I'm with the U.S. Commercial Service, the Office of U.S. Operations. Today's webinar is an internal program to refresh the knowledge of CS and EXIM field employees on organizations' programs, products, services, resources, and possibly upcoming events. This information, what we're hoping is that you can pass this information on to those clients that you counsel. We hope to provide you as staff in the field with the training and tools, resources that you need at this point for access to the information that would be helpful to your clients on both sides. Today, we have a number of speakers from both EXIM and from the U.S. Commercial Service. And the agenda was on the Outlook site, so I won't go over that again, except to now introduce Sharon Koenig, the Managing Director of the Eastern and Western regions for EXIM Bank. And Sharon's going to both give us some sort of best practices about how she works in her region with the U.S. Commercial Service cooperatively, but we'll also answer some questions that we got from the U.S. Commercial Service folks on our one of our last internal calls. Sharon, thank you very much for coming, and please proceed.
I appreciate the opportunity to meet with so many of my colleagues across the country from both EXIM as well as the Commercial Service. So I'd like to basically start off by addressing some of those questions that were raised. So we'll get those out of the way very quickly and not keep you waiting on that. So someone asked if there were any new EXIM Bank products and services. What do we have that's new? You know, I'd like to just say that one of the things that we're taught with many exporters right now is something called a reasonable spread of risk policy. You know that we, of course, can write policy for one single buyer to cover single or multiple shipments. We also write insurance policies to cover an entire export portfolio where the exporter would be required to insure everything that they sell with certain standard exclusions. But the reasonable spread of risk option is something that we need to negotiate a portfolio with an exporter. So if they want to omit certain countries or certain key corporate buyers, we're willing to take a look at that. And I think that shows our flexibility and also provides the exporter with the type of insurance policy that is really going to meet their needs. The only thing to remember about that is that we're looking for a portfolio that's going to cover at least about 50% of their entire portfolio on a U.S. dollar volume. So if you have any customers that might be interested in that, please let us know. We're happy to talk about a reasonable spread of risk option under standard multi-buyer policy. On the board of directors, there really, unfortunately, is no update. There are nominees in front of the committee in the Senate, but the Senate has not yet taken up a vote on those nominees. That's the status of our board. And up on the funding, which you all should know, we are now under a continuing resolution which expires on March 23rd, expires the continuing resolution. So we'll all be hearing more about that as we approach the second and third week of next month. There was a question on what countries are quote, most promising. Not to sound political, but I think every country where EXIM Bank is open is promising because we want to support U.S. exports to a market where we can. We are open in about 180 countries around the world. I'm sure you all are familiar with our country schedule. If you have questions at all about any of the special conditions that you might read about on the entry schedule, call us. There is some quote-unquote reading between lines that we can assist you with if something there is unclear. Please let your EXIM Bank regional director know. Map on exim.gov, that's usually updated as we are aware of new stories coming in, new success stories. As far as how it's updated on a type of a regular basis with activity, that I'm not quite sure of. I did place a call into our communications team to have me get a little bit more in-depth understanding about that. So I would, take a look at that, and if you have any questions on who's using our services, you can call us EXIM Bank, and we'll try to help you as best that we can. The advanced question that I got was regarding the REP program, how are members determined. The REP program actually is, you remember it used to be called our city-state program, city-state partner. It's now called Regional Export Promotion Program, or REP, R-E-P-P. The REP program brings together state, county, and local nonprofit economic development agencies or entities to expand export opportunities in their geographic areas. They provide largely a marketing function to spread the word to exporters and the export-related business community about EXIM Bank and our products. We have a manager of that program in our Washington headquarters. His name is Eric Stevens. That's spelled A-E-R-E-K, Stevens, S-T-E-E-N-S. So, of course, our email is our first name dot last name at exim.gov. So if you have additional questions, or if you have entities that are interested in the REP program, please contact your local EXIM Bank officer in regional offices. They will assist you in coordinating that request. That I just wanted to now move into some of the best practices that I experience when I'm working with the Commercial Service and U.S. Department of Commerce. First, I mentioned that we have a little bit of a change this fiscal year, which is a good change, and that is that our regional teams are no longer restricted to just dealing with small businesses by the SBA definition. So our colleagues at Commerce and Commercial Service do that restriction, so they are even more in line with you than we were before. Best ways to work together if we can't be face-to-face every minute of the day is email introductions, and I really appreciate an email introduction. So the ex has my contact information, and I have the exporter's contact information. So those are great ways, very efficient to get us in front of your clients and prospects who are interested in learning more about our services. When Commerce Department or Commercial Services talk about EXIM Bank, oftentimes in experience, it's best to lead with our insurance product. Sometimes exporters can get a little flustered, overwhelmed in talking about financing, and our big foot in the door product is the credit insurance. It's very easy to understand. It protects them against non-payment. It's used as a sales tool so they can offer terms, and that's something that they can use tomorrow. It's an immediate solution for export business, especially if you're talking to them about going on a platinum key or a gold key or even the international partner search. So just we like to be able to lead with the credit insurance. Bank Regional Director will be happy to talk about our financing solutions on a subsequent meeting with the exporter. So we'll be able to provide them with information on whatever their challenges are. I thought at EXIM Bank it would be for us to know programs you like us to lead with. I mean, additionally, I lead with the Gold Key. I think that's one of the best programs that you have. You have many great programs, but if you would tell us what your feeling is on what you typically would like us to talk about first and foremost as your quote-unquote foot in the door. That would be very helpful for us to know. It's important for the exporter to know how the Platinum Key, Gold Key, and the IPS work together with our insurance products to help them grow their international sales. And I hope you'll remember that we do have a joint flyer which talks about the insurance and the Gold Key, so they're side by side as a constant reminder of how those products work together. Working with exporters, we want to collaborate with you ahead of time to find out what their needs and interests are. And I think offering to joint call is a very good way to present a seamless solution for the exporter. So I do appreciate that joint calls are very beneficial. Sometimes it's also useful as a learning experience on initial call for an ex-banker or U.S. Department of Commerce to really hear how each of us present our agency products. I think it's very valuable. I think the thing to be aware of, though, as you're on these joint calls, is to try not to get too deep in the weeds on all of these programs. If you keep it at a high level, cursory basis, I think it's much better on the initial call for the exporter to really understand what each of our agencies' products are and how they can work together. We can always do an individual call after the joint call to down on what those needs are and what the products are. Summary, to just deliver the value proposition and emphasize how we work together, I think is one of the best approaches.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Are there any other wisdom you want to impart at this?
Just one last thing, if I could say, is that follow-up and follow-through is really critical. And I think it's important for us to know each other's goals and how our production is being measured. We know they all want to help each other out and help the exporter, of course, but let's just remember to let the other agency know when an exporter is planning to attend a trade mission, when using a Platinum Key, Gold Key, or an IPS, or you have a company that's identified as a win situation, and our side, when a company purchases an insurance product or uses any other EXIM Bank product. That casual information sharing on a local basis is really critical to our overall success.
Great. Thank you so much again. Now we will move on to Tembi Sechrist, who's currently the Acting Deputy Director for U.S. Operations for the U.S. Commercial Service. Tembi?
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Sharon, for that great overview with some fantastic information of what you guys are doing and interested to hear about your new product of the reasonable spread of risk. That sounds like a great option for a lot of our companies. So just a basic update. I know, a lot of our offices do work very closely together. I'm out of our Seattle office where I've worked with John Brislin for a number of years. A lot of those best practices I know are taking place, but it's always so good to have reminders and just reemphasize the importance of our joint relationship and how much we both add to the conversation with these exporters. So just, brief reminder, we do have 106 offices throughout the U.S. We're in 77 markets overseas. Plus, we have a number of partner post relationships where we connect with the state econ officer in posts where we may have a commercial service presence, but still see an opportunity and a growth for commercial engagement. And so our branded programs, the Gold Keys, some of the ones you mentioned there, are available through State Department posts with the econ officers. So if anyone was not aware of that, if you do have some of those more frontier markets that you may want some additional information on, please do reach out and we can put you in touch with some of those partner post offices as well. For where we're headed, it's again great to hear that you guys are working again with companies of all sizes. We're looking at the same client base there, but really focusing on some strategic priority sectors that we've spent a lot of time working to align with the states that we're in, making sure that there are opportunities overseas for these strategic priority sectors, and trying to be much more proactive about going after some of the opportunities for our local companies there. So you hear a little bit more about what the specific states are focused on. If you haven't had a chance to connect with the EXIM on some of their priority sectors, they'll assist all exporters there, but there are certain industries that we're really focused in on being very proactive and trying to get some big deals to those companies there. On sharing success stories, that is absolutely a key area. We've always enjoyed being able to go to the EXIM website and see some of those cleared stories there. We're also starting to make a push on our local websites to get cleared stories from local exporters up on there. So we have those to share back as well that have been, cleared by our clients that we work with and available for anyone to take a look at how successful collaboration works and some of those successful deals that have closed. So we're definitely interested in more ways that we can collaborate in that and get some of those publicly available wins out there on our websites as well. Something else that when you mentioned sharing about programs to lead with, Gold Key is obviously one of our best programs to go out in there, but one specifically that we found for working with credit insurance specifically, if a company has already narrowed in on a particular country, we've got a new program that's maybe 2 years old called an initial market check. And it's kind of a pre-Gold Key if a client's not ready yet to invest in a full Gold Key but wants a little bit more in-depth information. We're able to go out to several markets and say, hey, can you just give us a little bit more information before we invest in a full Gold Key service, an initial market check, help make some of that determination moving forward there. So that's been a great opportunity for us to get some additional information as well. Events coming up, I know many of our EXIM colleagues have been a great contributor to our Discover Global Market programs, and we absolutely appreciate that. We're doing another one in Kansas City on design and construction. So for any clients that you're working with in that industry sector, that's a great opportunity. We're bringing in groups of buyers and prime contractors for some big projects coming up, and would like to make you part of that conversation and make sure that we have all aspects of the export process laid out for our clients, looking at some of those opportunities there. Other opportunities, I know many, again, of our EXIM colleagues have participated in what we call our Showtime counseling at major trade shows. When Sharon, you mentioned, letting people know when companies are going to trade shows or are on trade events. If any of our EXIM colleagues are going to be at a major trade show where we're doing some of our counseling programs, it's easy just to put you into our counseling lineup where companies say, hey, I want to meet with our representative from Germany, from Brazil, and EXIM. So you're going to be at a show, touch base with your local USIAC. They can get you in touch with the right person who's a point on that show and make sure that you're part of any formal programs that we're doing there, and that we can get in front of as many clients as possible. Again, just to reiterate how important this partnership is. So in years past, we've had many years past a much more aligned approach to metrics and counseling. Our national director reminded me that years ago we used to have an EXIM person as the head of our New York regional office, and we had an SBA person as head of our Chicago office and regional area, and it was much more aligned in that way. And we moved away from that, but I think we can still work together and coordinate very closely on how we counsel together, how our metrics are aligned, so that we're all moving towards the same goal as a step as possible, so we can get the best service to the clients that we all serve. So that's a basic overview, and I know we've got some great more information from some of our colleagues that demonstrate how we work together so well and so closely. So I am excited to hear more about that.
Thank you very much. And just as a reminder, which I neglected to tell you all, we are going to take Q&A at the end. We have allowed time for that. If you are thinking of a question right now and you want to type it in, just click on the chat or Q&A button at the top of your screen for the webinar, and we will address those questions, both the written questions, and then the operator will will tell us how to do verbal questions as well. And we'll do that after a brief client presentation at about a little after 1. In the meantime, we are happy to have a U.S. Commercial Service, David Edmondson. He's a senior trade specialist at our Minneapolis office. We were supposed to have Dennis Griffin from EXIM Bank as well, but he has been gripped by what it sounds like a flu. So, David, please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, originally the plan for this presentation was to do it jointly with myself along with Dennis Griffin, who is co-housed here in Minneapolis. We had all sorts of witty banter planned, a nice anecdote about how we share coffee to establish and show the way that we work together closely and communicate every day. But unfortunately, as Laura mentioned, Dennis is out with the flu. So I'll try to present some of the points that he was going to go over as well, along with what I was going to be covering. Kind of some of the main points that I wanted to go over was my approach to counseling with companies, and then how I interweave EXIM services and the partnership that we have with them into kind of my normal day-to-day approach with companies. In terms of my normal day-to-day, I always like to tell folks that the role of the commercial service, and one of the key components of my job here in Minnesota, is to be a knowledge broker, facilitator type person for companies within the export community. To tell folks that, we're that initial one-stop shop, either to experts that are here locally, folks like DEC members, lawyers, accountants, translators, whoever that might be, other government agencies such as the EXIM Bank, or in our international offices. Presenting it in this way, then companies kind of get used to having that idea of, if they don't know who to talk to, then we're kind of that initial kind of clearinghouse, if you will. And it's well for Dennis because then we're able to feed him leads and kind of preset and already know a little bit about the services and the credit insurance and the other things that EXIM can do. So how do I kind of EXIM as needed and then initially propose EXIM? I'm kind of in initial counseling and client interaction phase with the company. So as companies come across my desk, that standard counseling process that a lot of us in the U.S. commercial service field go through of kind of learning what's their international exposure right now. We often use a term called export ready. What markets are they in? What is the sales channel process? How do they go to market? Do they sell direct? Do they go to distributors? Kind of getting the full background of what they are doing. As I go through this process, a lot of what I'm thinking about internally is where gaps within their sales process, and then what are some of the core strengths that not only do we have here within the commercial service, but then partners that we work together with very closely. I can find things that I can very quickly plug and play into, kind of the things that would be easy wins for the exporter that would make their lives better. I'm looking for things like, in some of our matchmaking services for the company to say, I have a great partner in country X, but I don't know how to find somebody that looks just like that in country Y. Or I'm going to this specific trade show, I'm not quite sure how to maximize my time there. Or I would go to this country, but I got burned there once, and the payment process is just kind of tricky. So having that type of conversation and trying to lead the company in a way where it's going to be easy to tee up things that I know I want to bring into kind of international growth process. So that's part of that counseling process. For EXIM specific, the way I usually tee that up is as I'm talking to the company, again, is asking those questions of how do they sell? Are they going to distribution partners? Are they going direct? How does that process work? And it's a very simple question of, do you usually get cash in advance or do you offer terms? I guess I would say still, even in 2018, I'd say 5-ish, if not more percent of companies are going to say, with a lot of confidence, well, I always get cash in advance, and if I don't get cash in advance, then it's not worth my trouble. And the response there is going to be that nice measured and kind of a slow positive, well, that's great, and if you can get cash in advance, you should always do that. Cash is wonderful. But have you ever lost a deal because you didn't offer terms, or did you used to offer terms and you thought you had this wonderful partner, but did you ever get burned once? And it's shocking how often a company kind of, you'll see them think for a second, and they'll kind of admit, well, yeah, I got burned once and I lost this partner and I lost 10 grand. Or I don't want to go to that country just because I have a colleague that used to be at another company and they got burned. And so it's at this point that I'll bring up the idea of the EXIM Bank. And I really like the way Sharon said of keeping it really high level, and a couple of reasons. One, it's a clear understanding of, the EXIM services are going to be changing over the course of time, and I don't want to misquote and I don't want to mess that up. And two, going back to my original point of presenting myself as that knowledge broker, facilitator, the person that can bring in real subject matter experts. And so in that same vein, my goal is to present the high level and get the company interested so it's teed up for our EXIM Bank partners. And so some of the key points I'll kind of bring up is I'll explain that it's a different federal agency, but they work together very closely. Usually this is where I'll make my joke about how Dennis and I share a coffee pot and we coffee in every other week, just to kind of highlight the closeness of the relationship. I'll mention that we work together closely. I can facilitate the introduction. I've already kind of established some of that trust with the exporter, and so I can kind of manage the dialogue and just make it as smooth and easy as possible. I'll mention that EXIM primarily exists to serve companies just like them, that's what their kind of mandate is to work with U.S. exporters, and that they're not only willing but would be excited to talk to them. And then I will usually introduce kind of some of the very basic programs that Dennis has taken the time to train our staff on, and not only our staff but the staff around the Midwest on. Specifically, I'll talk about the Export Express policy and how easy it is for exporters to sign up for. And then I'll usually also throw in another nugget or two about export brokers, the seamlessness of the process, and emphasize that it's an opportunity. It costs nothing to learn more, and it's this wonderful tool that a lot of folks might not already be aware of. So probably my biggest point for this is that oftentimes when we talk to companies, that they probably don't already know exactly what EXIM offers. I have a couple of stories I was just kind of thinking through in advance for this webinar. I remember I was actually a few months back, I was at a company that is, the gold standard for a commercial service client. They've probably done 6 or 7 gold keys with us in the last couple of years. They've done a single company permission. I was actually out there to kind of help schedule another 2 or 3 gold keys that they wanted to do in the next 6 to 12 months to kind of talk through what their goals were. And, I reminded myself of one of my standard kind of lines of questioning was about that payment process. And to my surprise, the company kind of looked at me and was like, I don't want to talk about gold keys anymore. Tell me about this export-import bank thing. This is amazing. This is gold, I think was exact words. And subsequently, Dennis, quickly was able to connect with the company, get out there and start bringing them into the system. And it's one of those things where if I hadn't thought to do that, Dennis is covering this multi-state region, and so being able to use us as kind of that extension of kind of business development or the marketing arm is really beneficial for him. So the other key points that I wanted to highlight, kind of going back to that closeness of the relationship and being able to help each other. When I'm going out to a company, I'll regularly let Dennis know that, hey, I'm going to a company, and based off of what I know about them already, I think they could be a fit. I think there could be an opportunity for him so that he's ready in case we have him quickly come in and engage. Also, as I've said a couple of times, my goal is to present myself as someone that's connected to the export support community. And so by Dennis responding quickly, it's going to validate that claim that I'm making with the company. We're going to further reinforce that for me to build that trust I'm wanting to build with a client, which will allow me to, when there's another opportunity that I want the exporters to engage in, might be a little scary for them. It's going to help them to take that leap of faith because of that trust that we're helping to establish. And great for EXIM because they're looking to engage with those companies. And then I guess the other thing I was going to say is Dennis is very good at kind of doing that circle back. When I pass a company off to him as that subject matter expert, when he goes out to visit the company, always make sure to let me know. If my schedule allows, I will always try to attend, just to kind of be there and learn from him as he's doing what he's doing. I can best introduce and kind of keeping that cross-communication going. And the last thing that Dennis and I were going to do, if he was able to be here, is kind of walk through an example that literally has just taken place in the last couple of weeks. So here in Minnesota, I cover the medical technology area. And in early December, there was a brand new company for our office that came into the network. They initially came across my desk because they are going to be attending Arab Health, which is a very large trade show in Dubai that takes place in late January every year. That company was going to be attending with the state of Minnesota, and I thus then was engaging with them to let them know the support available at the show, and then additionally around the world just on an ongoing basis. So through that initial outreach that I did to them, I was able to provide just a very basic overview of the commercial service, that 30,000-foot overview. That went well, which then led to me being able to set up an out-of-office visit where I went and I met them in person, was there for that full hour, just a little bit more, to do that deep dive conversation that I talked about earlier. And then it was at that time that I was able to kind of go through and kind of learn the sales process, introduce EXIM on that initial level. Quickly was then able to introduce Dennis. Dennis actually just visited the company last Thursday. And it was through that meeting that Dennis was able to kind of give the more technical side of how everything works. And it was also interesting because through that meeting, because Dennis knows what I like to do and the information that we provide, he was getting questions, from the company's perspective of, hey, I have another international trade guy. I have this other problem. And the company was asking about sanctions to Iran and how does it all work. But through that conversation I've had with Dennis already, he was like, this isn't my thing. You should talk to David. And then able to very quickly get the company back onto my desk, and I was able to provide the information that the company needed to kind of further align who does what, continue to build that relationship. I think those are kind of the main points that I was going to say. Again, I think my biggest takeaway is you present the basic overview, engage with your local person, and in terms of talking to the companies, really don't assume that they already know about EXIM services. We on the commercial service side of things, I often forget that I'm working in export promotion, economic development every single day. I'm always thinking about kind of all these different tools in the toolbox, but the U.S. company might not be. And so letting them know what opportunities are out there, I think, can be really valuable.
Thank you so much, David. And just as a reminder, David mentioned connecting with your regional EXIM representatives, and so I just wanted to remind you all that on the invitation for this webinar, at the bottom, there's both a link to EXIM regional offices and also U.S. Commercial Service offices. So you all can certainly access each other through that. And another reminder that you can ask questions right now, even as we speak, by clicking on the chat or the Q&A button. And next up, we have Paul Frost, who is a U.S. Commercial Service commercial officer currently based in South Florida. And Paul is going to talk about his experiences working with EXIM Bank. He happens to actually work with Sharon. And then when he's done, he is going to introduce a client of the South Florida USIAC, and that client will give you his own perspective. So Paul, thank you.
Hey everybody, Paul Frost here in the Fort Lauderdale Export Assistance Center in beautiful South Florida. I hope everybody's doing well. So I had the opportunity to talk with you today and just give a couple of thoughts. I have a presentation that I sent in, so could you just move into that slide? Great. The title of my presentation is What I Wish Every USIAC Knew About EXIM, Bank, and Trade Finance. So if you can just go to the next slide, my background, I used to work at EXIM between 2003 and 2007 in D.C. I started off as an economic impact analyst. So I thought at that time I wanted to do trade policy. And so I was in the policy and planning division and enjoyed it a lot. But after about 3 years, I really wanted to be more on the deal-making side to the Working Capital Guarantee Program. And I managed relationships with about 25 banks that use the Working Capital Guarantee Program at EXIM. And then I got an offer to go to BB&T in Charlotte, North Carolina in 2007. So I went there. I was there until 2013. I got an offer to go to Bank of America. At the time that I was leaving BB&T, considering leaving BB&T, I heard about the U.S. Commercial Service. I bumped into Eric Wolf, who many of you know in Costa Rica. He's regional SEO, and he was at a Charlotte World Trade event, and he said, hey, the U.S. Commercial Service is hiring on the Foreign Service side, and you might want to apply. You have a background that's relevant. So well, what do I have to lose? I might as well apply, and so I did, and then I forgot about it several months, and then I got a call from Todd Avery, who said, hey, do you come in and do an interview? So at that time, I just started at Bank of America. So I guess I didn't feel any pressure or any anxiety because I thought, well, I probably won't get it anyway, and I'll just go ahead and enjoy a day in D.C. And so I ended up getting the offer and then joining the commercial service, which has been a great experience and really a pleasure to be here. But through those experiences of dealing with different export assistance centers throughout the country, I came away with a few things that I hope I can share just in terms of working smarter, not harder. I've really enjoyed listening to the different presentations and ideas that everybody has shared so far because I think they're spot on. They're really practical and good suggestions for how we can work together. So if you can just go to the next slide. Number one thing I would say is just regularly meet and have a call with your EXIM colleague. Look for areas of strategic opportunity. So I have the opportunity to work. I'm fortunate to work here with our colleagues in South Florida, who are co-located in Fort Lauderdale and Miami. But even in the case where you don't necessarily have somebody in your office and you don't share a coffee pot like it does, there's still an opportunity to just maybe every month have a call and just kind of exchange some informal ideas about who you're working with, what are some things that you're seeing in the marketplace, because those sessions of planning are always just really good. And especially since we're being asked to be more specific and focused on sectors and developing sectors that have the highest potential opportunity for export growth and, moving the dial and making deals. This is really, I think, important that we don't pass the opportunity to sort of exchange ideas because we are both, EXIM and we are dedicated to be working for the exporters and we're meant to be, a resource to them. So the number 2 thing I would suggest is, this has kind of been covered, but the way I laid it out is think of just 3 simple questions, and then be prepared to hand them the information that provided to us. So number 1, do you offer payment terms to your international customers? Do you have concerns about repayment from your foreign buyers? And one that hasn't really been covered yet in this presentation, but I think is important, is do you need access to working capital to support your export sales growth? Because in my days as a banker, I spent a fair amount of time on trade finance, but then I also spent a lot of time when I was in banks at just basic commercial lending, because trade finance side had gone downhill a lot. There wasn't as much going on, and so I switched over to a traditional, just domestic role. What I learned in that experience, even though it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do, was that banks, companies do need working capital when they're in a high growth phase, and if they're selling internationally, that means they're giving terms. That means they have accounts receivable that are due from a foreign country, and the bank traditionally is very reticent to lend on those receivables. In some cases, that can be a big chunk of their working capital, which limits their growth potential, because a company only has so much cash that they can use on hand to support their growth. So by having access to working capital through EXIM Bank or SBA, that can really open up some opportunities for the company to keep growing the international sales. And companies have no idea that there's a way for them to actually tap into those foreign receivable on their balance sheet. And so when you hear about that, that's just a great opportunity for them, and they're often happy to hear it. So basically, those are 3 things that I would suggest, three simple questions, and then just be prepared to hand off the information and then hand them off to the EXIM colleagues to take it from there. No need to get into the weeds. So the third thing for that I suggest is every 6 months, just take a review of the Trade Finance Guide. I have a link in my presentation. It's written by our very own Yuki Fujiyama and INA. It's a really good guide. It's very simple and easy to understand, both for exporters and for people that just aren't even familiar with the trade finance process. But it walks people step by step. And I've read a lot of trade finance guides in my lifetime, and I can say that this one is the best written because it's very thorough and yet simple and easy to understand. But it's not necessarily easy to remember all the time, so it's good to just get a refresher every 6 months. And the fourth thing I would recommend is, and this is just my personal, having been on the other side with the banks, it might be a good idea to just look into some of those people, the banks that are using the working capital guarantee program at EXIM or the SBA lenders too. There's a working capital lender locator that you can find on the EXIM website, and you search by state. Every state will have the assigned people that are lending in that state. Now, I would just say 4 caveats. Number 1, that website isn't always up to date or accurate, so just take that with a grain of salt. It's largely accurate, but it's sometimes it's a date. Number 2, always keep the local EXIM person informed whenever you're having conversations with banks, just because they're our partners and we don't want to be going outside of what they do. This is more their prime responsibility. Number 3, when you're talking with lenders, just think about a specific sector, strategic priority sectors. So, lenders are busy, but they have important revenue generation goals, and so their time is limited. But if you have a specific sector that you think is high impact, I think it would be an opportunity to just have a discussion with some people that are lending in that sector, because you might find there's an opportunity to collaborate in some way to teach more exporters. If anything, you'll probably come away with a better sense of what's the real activity, because these folks that are lending, remember, they're processing wires, they're doing documentary collections, they're doing deposits, they're doing all the things that really give them great insight, detailed insight into what a company is actually doing internationally, more than we do from our side. And then the fourth thing to say is that the SBA Export Working Capital Program might be a better fit on the working capital side than just depending on what the company's needs are. And that's just my experience, because the EXIM Working Capital Guarantee Program has no upward limit, but so it tends to be easier for a company to use if they only need, say, a $500,000 line of credit or a $1 million line of credit. It might be easier for them to use the SBA program. So the next slide you'll see is me and my colleague here in Fort Lauderdale, Jennifer Simpson. So we walked the show, the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show, in November together, and we had just a great time. And you know what we discovered is when I would talk to somebody and they kind of looked at me and said, well, I don't really need to talk to you. I don't really need to find new markets. And Jennifer would start talking about protection for payment purposes. They would often perk up and they would say, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. And then the opposite happened, where sometimes Jennifer would be talking about insurance and they would say, no, I don't need that, but I would talk to them and have something. So anyway, the picture you see here is kind of a fun story. At lunch, we were just getting a bite to eat, and we started chatting with a gentleman next to us, and he turned out to be a captain of a mega yacht that was at the show. And, I guess we had a fun conversation. At the end of the discussion, he said, well, why don't you come over and take a tour of the boat? So the picture on the right is me on the 4th deck, which behind me is a jacuzzi, and I'm standing on a helicopter landing pad. And it's like a $50 million yacht. So anyway, kind of a unworldly experience there, but a great time, and really appreciate Sharon and Jennifer and all the folks at EXIM that work with us. They're terrific partners here. So those are my five suggestions. So just wanted to let me see if our client here is ready to go with Montecam.
Oh, thanks, Paul. In the meantime, just again. That after the gentleman from Montecam comes on, the operator will help with Q&A. But in the meantime, anybody who would like to ask a question can click on the chat or Q&A button and send it in, and we will answer those as well.
Hi, I'm Barakat. I'm joining the call.
Great. Paul here. Okay. Great. And Montecam?
Yes, I am the treasurer for Montecam. My name is Amber Barakat. Montecam International is basically we're a thermoplastic resins distributor. We are an international company, so we distribute plastic resins all across the world. EXIM plays a big part in our business by providing us not only commercial services, market intelligence, finding customers, and customer relations, but it also is with the insurance coverage and mitigating risk. EXIM does cover where other insurance companies will not. They do provide 90% coverage. There's no deductible. They do provide us and help us out with country and political litigation. And we have a quick turnaround time as well. It's 5 to 10 days. We do a lot of business in countries where people don't want to insure, or I should say insurance companies don't want to insure. So we'll reach out to EXIM for those needs and that coverage. We do a lot of business in sub-Saharan Africa, countries like the Coast, Senegal, and Ghana. Also in Central America, Ecuador, Peru, South America as well, and Brazil, and also Baltic countries, such as Bulgaria.
Very much. All right, so now we come to the Q&A portion. Operator, Brandon, are you there?
I am here.
All right, remind people how they ask a question.
We will now begin the question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question over the phone line, please press *1. Please unmute your phone and record your first and last name clearly when prompted. Your name is required to introduce your question. To withdraw your question, you may press *2. Once again, at this time, if you would like to ask a question over the phone line, please press *1.
Great, Brandon. In the meantime, while we're waiting for people for the questions to get queued up, I have a question for Sharon. So Sharon, you mentioned at the beginning that there is a list of 180 countries that have an EXIM presence. And where would folks find that list? Would it be on the EXIM website?
Yes, it's on exim.gov, and if you go to the top bar across our website, one of the major categories on the top says Tools for Exporters. If you click on that, a sub-menu will appear, and I believe I'll have to look for it myself, but it's one of the items right under there. I can't remember which side it's on, but it's right there under Tools for Exporters. Country Limitation Schedule is what they would click. It will take you directly to the schedule. You can click on the alphabet at the top of the form, and it will jump you right to those, starting with that letter.
Thank you very much. Brandon, do we have any questions?
I'm currently no questions over the phone line.
Okay, great. I have one more question, and again, it's for Sharon. And, you mentioned a joint U.S. Commercial Service EXIM flyer, and so I'm audit a USIAC, so I'm hoping that people know where those are. But do you have a place on your website that would, where people could find that?
I don't know if it's on our website. I'd have to actually look for it. But everybody in the field in EXIM Bank's field should have that. If they don't, I'm happy to email it to you, Laura, and I'm sure the local EXIM Bank regional folks have that. It's an electronic PDF flyer.
Great. Brandon, any questions?
I'm showing no questions at this time.
All right. We will wait probably one more minute for people if they do wish to ask questions.
All right. And I would like to remind participants, if you would like to ask a question at this time, to please press star 1. All right, look like we have a question in queue. One moment, please. It's from Shelby. Your line is open.
Hi. We have a great local representative for EXIM, Paul Duncan, out in California. And there's just so much opportunity for collaboration, and it would be excellent to get him out here more. I don't know if there's any plans or any kind of opportunities, in terms of a budget for EXIM or, a road show or other, opportunities to get some of our representatives in states that aren't actually co-located and sharing a coffee pot out here, because I think those joint meetings are so helpful and just can prove to be quite successful, but the opportunities aren't as frequent as we'd like.
Where are you located?
It's not really a question, I guess, but more of a statement. I'm located in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Salt Lake City. Okay. We'll definitely mention that to Paul. I don't know if he's on the line, but we have travel budget. There's no restriction on our travel budget right now. And so usually what we like to do when we plan trips like that is usually to spend at least 3 days at the locations in and around Salt Lake. So if you have clients that are interested in a one-on-one meeting, I'm sure Paul would be very happy in talking with you about putting a trip together.
Great. I'll talk to him. We'd love to have Paul back here for a couple of days. So I was just under the impression that wasn't possible. So I'm very, very happy to hear that.
Yep, not at all. Thank you very much for asking.
And any other questions?
I'm showing no further questions on the phone line.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Again, just as a reminder, the contact information, our contact information is there, and also the regional U.S. Commercial Service and EXIM information is there. And we will send out instructions to our speakers. We'll at our end, for the U.S. field, you'll hear how to get a recording, the access to the recording, and then I'll send it also to Sharon so that she can send it to all the regional folks for EXIM. And with that, we will close out. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining. I hope it was helpful. Bye.
This concludes today's conference. All lines may disconnect at this time.